Welcome to this episode of Token Jester, an insight into outsider dance. I am Aishani Ghosh, and I'm your host for this series. I'm a company artist at Sita Patel Dance, but I'm a freelance artist, practitioner, and researcher in my own right. So today I'll be in conversation with the incredible Dr. Mubin Syed, who is also known as Desi Doc on Instagram. His book, Healing from My History, is an account of how British colonial rule in South Asia led to tragic famines and destruction, and how these traumatic events unfolded, impacted both the mind and bodies of South Asians for generations to come. I was super drawn to having him on this podcast because he emphasizes that knowledge is power, which can heal intergenerational trauma and that cycle to allow for better changes in the next generation. So without further ado, hi, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Aishani?
Not bad. We're really, really grateful that you agreed to be on this podcast episode.
My pleasure.
I guess why don't we just get stuck into it?
That
And
sounds good. Yeah.
it would be amazing for you to give a little bit of insight into your research and your journey.
Yes. So what really kind of started me on my journey is it was really a moment of personal shock. I had a heart attack
Mm,
um, at a relatively young age 52, despite being what Western medicine would consider low risk.
mm,
Um, I didn't smoke, I exercised daily, and had no family history.
mm,
And this experience kind of forced me to ask, why someone like me and, so many other South Asians were developing heart disease so young. And because I always thought, well, I did notice that there was a lot of South Asians getting heart disease and diabetes and a lot of these conditions.
mm,
And I just thought, well, maybe I just thought they're probably just being unhealthy. But thought I was concerned enough about my health and I was being careful only to find out that it affected me also. And I thought there had to be something in like a predisposition in could it be our lifestyle? Could it be our, genetics? And when I started researching about that, I realized that South Asians have like 4 times the higher rate of diabetes compared to people in the same, um, I guess, nation, same country.
mm,
And I didn't understand that. It didn't make sense to me. Are we really being extra unhealthy compared to everyone else around us?
mm,
And yes, some of it was diet,
mm,
but and lifestyle. I mean, I admit there is some responsibility for that. But when you even look at babies, newborns, you look at young children, there's still you know, this predisposition, which I started seeing in a lot of research that was being done. And I thought, okay, this points to something more genetic if it's happening at such young ages. And that's when I came across a paper about the famine in China. They did a multi-generational study looking at the effects of health of people who had survived the famine and even their descendants. And even if you had not experienced the famine, there was much higher rates of diabetes or, alteration in your ability to, like pre-diabetes, I guess,
yeah.
in grandchildren. And this was a big surprise. It means that something was being passed down. And
Mm,
of course, when you look at South Asian history, you know, and by South Asia, of course, I mean the subcontinent, you see a terrible history of repeated, devastating, widespread famines that killed tens of millions of people.
mm,
And these were not just one time events, these were happening, very, very frequently. It's estimated, and particularly during the colonial period, by the way, there's a huge spike that happened during the colonial period.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, if one famine can devastate the genetics, can you imagine like at least 25 documented famines?
Mhm.
Um, so I know that this had to be the answer as to why. And I felt like I needed to really tell people about this research that I felt applied very well to South Asians.
Yeah,
And there
definitely.
was even some similar research done on the Bangladesh famine recently, 1974, that they are also affected. So it's not just the Chinese, for instance. It can affect any population. And this has also been reproduced in many other populations that have undergone famine
Incredible.
or scarcity.
Yeah. I think it's shocking when you look at it that way. If one famine can devastate, and then I mean, just the Bengal famine alone would have
Mhm.
killed hundreds, if not more people.
Yes, millions of people.
Yeah. So is that what specifically made you think of delving into epigenetic changes, or
Yes, exactly. It's originally I was thinking it started as a medical question, but then as I started learning about the history of South Asia, it really made sense that this had to be the source of a lot of the issues that we're having today, with heart disease being 4 times
Mm,
higher than the general population. Diabetes, same thing. This is
mm.
such a high rate. Um, it had to be a partial explanation.
And what
It had to
would
be a factor.
oh, okay, yeah, definitely. I think for us as professional dancers, we do train like athletes often. And so for us,
Mhm.
it's really important that we understand the histories that our bodies hold, and the impacts that happen on our bodies consciously. I guess a question for you is, what does healing our bodies and mind look like for you?
So, for like an athlete in particular, as a dancer, I mean, of course, that's definitely an athlete. Um, it means kind of realizing that you need to, have this awareness of your body, knowing that fatigue, anxiety, uh, or even perfectionism, that could be too much of for our bodies.
Mm.
We really need to listen to our bodies and moving not just to train, but also to restore. Uh, you need to nourish yourselves with not just with food, but also with sleep and even sunlight. Too often we neglect that, especially if you're in a more temperate climate.
Yeah.
Um, and that can cause, things like vitamin D deficiency, and also just it's not good for our mental health. Um, and mentally, I think it's important to release shame and guilt about needing this for our body. It's important to get that rest and nourishment, especially in our culture where maybe too much to just kind of this grit, sort of to just push through, glorifying endurance. I think this awareness is very important for dancers and athletes. Um, it's you need to basically shift from surviving to thriving.
That's beautiful.
Um, and just be aware that you need to just have this, pay attention to our bodies. Don't overdo it. Is what I'm saying. Of course, pushing your body is good, but you need to have some balance with that.
Mm. Is there anything in regards to lifestyle and nutrition as South Asians? that you think we should be a bit more aware of to enhance our performance, but also just as humans?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that as South Asian athletes, we often, and I'm not saying I'm an athlete, I'm saying for speaking to you all,
Yeah.
I think that we overlook that our bodies are wired a little differently
Mm,
uh, because of the ancestral history of famine and undernutrition. I don't think you can simply copy Western nutrition or training models and expect the same results. I think, for instance, our bodies are more insulin resistant, even at lower body fat levels. So we're much more sensitive, or we need to be extra careful regarding refined carbs, sugary sports drinks,
mm,
um, and constant snacking.
mhm,
That can actually work against recovery and performance. I think we need to be putting emphasis on balanced macronutrients, such as fiber, slow digesting carbs like lentils, millets, vegetables, kind of going back to our roots, uh, to foods that our metabolism sort of evolved to handle. Also being aware that, we can be prone to micronutrient deficiencies such as vitamin D, not getting, because we're not getting the sun exposure, B12 and iron, and even vitamin C if we're not getting enough fresh fruits and vegetables.
mm.
Um, because of, and some of this, besides the vitamin C, is just due to our darker skin pigmentation, and vegetarian diets and indoor lifestyles. Um, these things can just, you know, happen. And these deficits can directly affect your muscle recovery, endurance, and hormone balance. And then the other thing is just being cognizant of lifestyle stress and sleep deprivation,
Yeah.
because these are performance killers.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of South Asian people of South Asian heritage, they push through fatigue. They
Mm.
think rest is laziness. And in reality, it's the complete opposite. I mean, structured rest, hydration, recognizing or stress recognition through, is where the real gains happen. You need to just do things like meditation, practice flexibility, mobility,
Mm.
even breath work,
Mm.
breathing exercises, which of course came from yoga. I mean,
Yeah.
meditation, all of this is part of our heritage. And it's very effective. I mean, even the Western world, it's known to be very helpful in protecting against stress or managing stress, I should say. Um, so the message I would say is, know your biology,
Mm.
eat like your ancestors did before famine, not during, and treat recovery as seriously as training.
That's wonderful. A bit of a side question.
Yes.
How do we get to know about our biology then? For a layperson, let's say.
Yeah, so I have tried, I mean, this was something that I was surprised about. I did do some research on this, and I found that is some unique physiological differences in South
Mm.
Asians compared to, uh, people who are not of South Asian origin. Um, we share some commonalities with people of Asian heritage, but I think there's some, differences as well. And I think we need to be extra careful about how our body responds. We have a slightly different engine, a metabolic engine, and we do have to be, there are differences in how our body responds to sugar, for instance.
Mm.
Um, and I was really surprised to learn all this. And I think so. So this is, I have written some articles. If you want, I could send you those articles
Very
talking about the
helpful.
differences of South Asian bodies. This is not my own research, but it's sort of compiled from all sorts of studies that have been uh, done in the past few decades that really show that there are some unique, interesting differences that all point to, by the way, in my opinion, a form of starvation adaptation. How does our body conserve energy? Um, Doing the same activities as someone else in the same setting. I talked about insulin resistance,
Hmm.
which is actually beneficial during starvation, but it does predispose us to be, storing fat, for instance. And that's something that we need to work a little bit harder at. And the interesting thing is that South Asian bodies we have what's called thin fat body type. We may, we don't store obvious amounts of body fat. We may look thin. Um, we tend to have lower amounts of lean muscle mass. Um, but if you do store fat, and a lot of South Asian people, particularly in middle age, do store fat, it's around the belly.
Mm,
So you get this. That's why it's called thin fat. You have relatively thin extremities,
mm,
and meanwhile, all the fat is stored around the abdomen,
mm,
which is an efficient way of doing it, but it predisposes the body to a lot of other problems because that's a very metabolically active and kind of harmful way of storing fat
mm,
for the body. And it's important to address that and try to reduce that as much as possible. Um, and to really to screen our bodies. You might look healthy, you might look even relatively thin,
mm,
but you can still have, you need to get checked for things like diabetes, check your blood pressure, check your, fasting insulin level, your hemoglobin A1C, uh, your lipid levels,
mm,
even if you're relatively young and healthy, because it can start relatively early and it can be undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. Uh,
mm,
and I think that it's important to, be extra careful with our bodies. Like I mentioned, adequate sleep, lower amounts of refined carbs, regular strength training,
mhm,
because we tend to have, and this has actually been documented also that a lot of South Asians are just, in general, are not as active as they should be.
mhm,
South Asians, in fact, there's been at least two studies that have shown that in terms of moderate intensity exercise, it's typically recommended 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. For South Asians, studies have shown, 266
Oh,
minutes of moderate intensity exercise. That's like almost double
yeah.
to maintain the same amount of health as someone who's, like a white person, for
Yeah.
instance. We need to exercise more, even though as as a population, we often exercise much less. And this
Hmm.
has also been unfortunately documented
Yeah.
in research studies that South Asians exercise the least of any ethnicity.
Mm. Is there a reason attributed to why we need almost double the amount of exercise?
Yeah, so we have higher amounts of our bodies we have higher. I think insulin resistance is part of it actually,
Okay.
um, and we have these predispositions. And I think historically our bodies were geared towards higher amount of physical activity. And now that we're living sedentary lives,
Mm.
it's very harmful. And I think that this was an adjustment that was made during periods of starvation. Or I shouldn't say necessarily starvation, but just having to be living in an agrarian lifestyle. And as you know, India was deindustrialized during the colonial period. So millions of people had to adjust to this. And
Mm.
now we're back to oftentimes being much less active than we should be.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Thank you. I didn't know half of what you just said. Um, I think often we hear the term cut out carbs, which can
Mhm.
lead to the opposite reaction to what the actual medical reason
Yeah.
is behind that. And it would be great for you as a medical profession to explain why it's important for us South Asians
Yep.
Be mindful of carb intake.
Right. I think, the key isn't, so people think, okay, cut out carbs. It usually should mean cutting out refined or processed carbs,
Mm.
like sugar, white bread, or sweets. People often think that all carbs are bad,
Hmm.
even eliminating healthy, complex ones like lentils or vegetables. And this can actually backfire and cause fatigue, nutrient loss, and you can even get stress-induced rebound eating, especially in South Asians with starvation adapted metabolisms. I would say don't cut out carbs. Just be careful about the types of carbs. Focus on whole, slow digesting carbs. Uh, lentils like dal, quinoa, um, brown rice, millets. We talked about, and pair steel cut oats. Pair these with protein and healthy fats to blunt glucose spikes.
Mm.
Um, Because for athletes, carbs are essential for recovery and energy. And don't think of fearing them. Think of them as tools, the right type to really help.
Mm. Brilliant.
It's about balance, not deprivation, and,
Yes.
and metabolic awareness. Just knowing what's good for your body.
Um, I don't think we explained starvation adaptation,
Mhm.
maybe for a non-medic person, but if you could just explain it, would be great.
Yeah. So this was, kind of interesting, but our bodies may, as a result of adaptation to starvation, we tend to store more fat because of insulin resistance.
Mhm.
Insulin resistance is actually a type of starvation adaptation.
Mhm.
And so by insulin resistance, what I'm saying is that if our bodies are more, they tend to have higher amounts of insulin,
Mhm.
and the function of insulin is to kind of push the glucose into the liver and the um, the, the muscles, and our bodies tend to sort of, because they have relatively higher amounts of that, we'll tend to push that more into our bodies and store it. And so I think we need to be extra active to burn that sugar off, so to
Yeah.
speak, because it is a survival mechanism to store this energy and
Mhm.
turn it into fat
Yeah.
for our bodies, and being extra careful about the type of foods that we eat so that we're not overeating or overindulging, knowing how much your body actually needs to maintain itself.
Mm.
Um, I often say you can't eat like someone next to you. You
Mm.
have to be extra careful, because we are somewhat different, slightly different from
Yeah.
people who are not South Asian.
Yeah. I think
But the good news is that we can be very, I mean, you live a very long, healthy life.
yes.
If you go back to being extra careful about your diet and exercising, getting enough sleep, managing stress. Um, that's basically
The most important things to think of.
most important thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, I guess my penultimate question is there's a lot of research now coming out about how the set 3 meals a day,
Hmm.
something that was introduced during the colonial um, rule in India, and actually we didn't actually eat 3 meals a day.
Yep.
Wonder whether this and yeah, what your opinion is on this and
Yeah, I think that's a great question about the history behind that, and
yeah.
why are we like engaged in this 3 meal a day?
Mm.
I mean, I actually was surprised that it's actually something that came about during the Industrial Revolution.
Ah.
It made sense under British influence, and even during in Britain itself, to manage workers.
Mm,
If because of the industrial work schedules and Western ideas of order and productivity, it was sort of imposed on South Asia. Um, before colonization, South Asians ate much more intuitively,
mm,
based on hunger, what your work for the day was involving, and natural rhythms.
mm,
Meals were smaller, often plant-based, spread throughout the day. There wasn't like a rigid breakfast, lunch, dinner model. And for South Asians today, I think, especially athletes, structured meals can be helpful to maintain your energy and recovery, but I think you should also, honor some intuitive cues. Like, sometimes your body might need more, sometimes, you may need to eat at different times. But don't reject structure, I think, but just sort of decolonize it.
mm.
Eat in a way that aligns with your body's needs, not some structure that was designed for 19th century factory workers in Britain.
Mm. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think everything you've said is very insightful. It's really interesting for you to take us through your research and for us
Thank
to
you.
think about. And I think we're in an era and we're in a generation where there's an overwhelming amount of information being thrown at us about food,
Mhm.
diet, nutrition, exercise, which these practices often fail to take into account the differences of different ethnicities and the history of different ethnicities.
Mhm.
So if you have maybe one sentence to as a takeaway
Mhm.
for our lifestyle as South Asians, what would you say?
I think the most important thing, I think three pillars of health is alignment, balance, and recovery.
Mhm.
Longevity comes from tuning into your body's ancient survival systems,
Mhm.
um, and tuning it to modern life. Fuel it well, rest it deeply, and move in ways that build stability, not stress.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think those probably what I would say.
Super powerful. I think that's a brilliant way to close this
Thank you.
podcast episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aishani. My pleasure.